Hey everyone, welcome to the second edition of my movie memory series. This time I'm tackling horror movies that I saw in theaters and at home. I really couldn't think of a way to put it in a title form, so hopefully whatever the end result of how I ever titled this video, this hasn't misled you in any way. So today I want to talk about 5 films that really terrified me at home and in the theater, and all these are a different plethora of experiences, and I'm going to kind of go over each of the experience and like what it made me feel. For the most part, it made me horrified, and it was very scary, very scary. And honestly, I'm not scared that often, but it happens. And so these are some films growing up all the way to my current state now that have scared me. So without further ado, let's talk about the 5 films that scared me growing up all the way up to my current time being alive. Let's start off with 2003's Darkness Falls. Now this is a movie that's not that great, and it's honestly about the Tooth Fairy. But I recall watching this as a kid. I was over at a neighbor's house back in my hometown where I lived. I wasn't too far away, I was like a block away. I was never really into horror films, I was always into kind of the action adventure. I think I liked Small Soldiers at the time and things like that. And then probably just a few other action adventure and fantasy movies, but I really was never into horror. Not at all. Not even like these awful 9% on Rotten Tomatoes films like Darkness Falls. But anyway, I went over to my friend's house. I remember it was a group of us, and it was a girl that I liked at the time, and we started watching Darkness Falls, and at the very opening scene, just the opening scene of the kid with his mom, good God. So let me set that up a little bit for you. This kid wakes up kind of like at 1 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning, one of those times when we used to wake up and be terrified of everything around us. Darkness was just scary, and there was a lot of things go bump in the night. Anyway, this kid lost his teeth, and he put his, teeth under the pillow like we normally do for a tooth fairy. And he sees the Tooth Fairy, and the Tooth Fairy you're not supposed to see, apparently, because if the Tooth Fairy sees you, it'll go after you and your family. And that's exactly what happens in the very first scene, is he gets scared, and he tries to go get his mom, and his mom's like, oh, everything's fine, and it turns on the hallway light, and he's like, everything's fine, everything's cool. It's like, no, I think I heard the Tooth Fairy in that room, the living room. So the kid just tells his mom, like, hey, can you go check it out? And she starts walking in there. It's like, see, nothing to be afraid of. And then you see her get dragged away, and then he freaks out, gets into the bathroom, and then like has the lights on all morning and all night, and his mom's murdered. And so that's kind of the premise of the movie, and apparently Tooth Fairy hates light, and for the rest of this kid's life he pretty much lives in light at all times. But what I really recall is being terrified of that first scene, and I literally just got behind the couch of my neighbor's house, and I literally was just like peeking my head up and down until I ran away halfway through the movie. I finished the movie probably a couple years later. Not a really good movie whatsoever, but I do recall that opening scene quite a bit, and that movie terrified me as a kid. 2003, I was only 11 years old, and so I was not terribly into horror films at the time, but I remember this movie scaring the shit out of me. So let's move on from there to another film that scared the shit out of me. So moving on from Darkness Falls, we're actually going to a movie in 2007, which I saw in theaters that scared the shit out of me, but also at the same time, it kind of cured my fear of horror films. And honestly, it was one of the films that kind of turned my mind into it. It was kind of an emotional film, but it was also a horror film at the same time. And I'm talking about I Am Legend. Now this is a Will Smith film, and I remember watching it in theaters with some friends, and I just recall closing my eyes and covering my eyes constantly because of the amount of jump scares in this movie. This movie has a lot of jump scares, a lot of build up to a lot of things that just like kind of go crazy. It's about a man who survives the apocalypse, and practically there's these vampiric-like creatures. I know in the book they're vampires, but I guess it's more like a zombie cancerous creature that can only really come out in the darkness a little bit, and is pretty much tormenting everybody who hasn't died from this disease that's pretty much wiped out the entire population. So it's Will Smith and his dog, and I just recall watching this in the theaters, being like gripping the seat, covering my eyes, just being terrified of everything. But honestly, this is the film that really kind of got me over being scared of film. Just horror films in general. I don't know how exactly that happened, but I kind of transitioned. I was about 15 years old, and so this is the time when I was kind of like, okay, some horror movies are pretty good. I don't mind jump scares anymore. Obviously, they still get me occasionally, but they didn't really get me at all. So I know I'm going a little bit out of order here, but the next film from I Am Legend is a film that I watched with my mom. We rented it one night. We ordered Godfather's Pizza. It's a pizza place around here in Springfield, Missouri. I think there's some stuff in Missouri. There's a really good pizza place. But anyway, I remember the pizza that we ordered. We rented this from our Blockbuster video. We rented The Descent. So this came out in 2005, and this movie still terrifies me a little bit to this day, and makes me a little bit scared of caves. And honestly, I don't really think I really want to go in caves, mainly because of this damn movie. And bats also as well. But The Descent, I remember renting this film with my mom, and both of us were like, yeah, let's just watch this horror movie. My mom and I don't really watch films together that much, and honestly, for the most part, we have pretty different tastes in films, and we just mostly just don't watch films that much. But when, in 2005, or whenever we saw it, probably 2006, I want to say, so kind of a year before I Am Legend. But I really remember watching this movie and being just terrified on the couch, left and right. My mom and I had to pause it several times because we were just so scared of what was going on the screen. Just these visceral attacks from these creatures in the cave that these four women, I think maybe five women. I have the movie. I haven't seen it in a while, clearly. But there's 5 women who went in this cave. They're all kind of having this traumatic experience, especially one of the main character. She had her husband die in a horrific accident, and they're all going in this cave just as friends, and they're just trying to seek adventure. And it all goes terribly awry when they get trapped in the cave somehow. There's a collapse of the entrance, and they have to find their way out a different way. But then they start running into these damn creatures that are just terrifying, and they are very much like vampires meets Gollum from Lord of the Rings. And it's just they're blind, and they're vicious, and they're cannibalistic. They eat each other, and they also eat as anything they can, really, because you know it's a cave system. There's not very much down there. So that's another film that I remember watching, being just viscerally exposed to something very scary in my life. So moving on from The Descent and I Am Legend from 2005 to 2007, around that time period, I'm jumping all the way to 2015 to where I actually have kind of woken up to horror films and all these new types of horror films that really speak to me and things that I really like. So during this time period, during that entire span, I watched The Exorcist and Alien and The Thing, and I love all those horror films, and I starting to like horror a lot more, but I was really particular about it as well. But I really recall in 2015 going to premiere of The Witch. This movie is by A24, starring Anna Taylor-Joy. It's actually her breakthrough role. I remember watching this in theaters by myself in pitch black darkness, being surrounded by this insane score, this slow burn of atmospheric horror film, and damn was I scared. I just remember gripping the seat just based on getting just chilled to the bone with the things happening on the screen. Obviously a lot of this was, you know, built up, and there was a lot of distrust among the family. It's really just about this New England family who the father sins and gets excommunicated from the community that they live in, and they have to go out in the woods and pretty much build a home for themselves. Their youngest baby disappears. They blame a witch. They don't exactly know what happened. And I guess Anna Taylor-Joy's character, Thomason, was the one who was last seen with the baby, so they start blaming her as the witch, and her twin brother and sister, the little ones, they're blaming her as well. And there's just this huge madness involved, and there's a lot of sin involved as well. There's a lot of really great biblical things and themes going on. But I don't want to talk about the film. I want to talk about my experience. I was really just jolted by everything going on. The sound was really great, and then just the ending really just flipped me out. This was the moment where I woke up to the fact that I'm like, I really love horror films, especially ones that are really well crafted and really well put together. There's a story that's really, you know, just compact and really still tells something that is really mind-boggling to me, and something that really can terrify me psychologically. And that was The Witch, and that's why it's probably my favorite horror movie of the last decade, probably. So the last thing I want to talk about is a film that came out last year in 2018, early on, with a film I watched with my former roommate Hannah. We went and saw the sci-fi Alex Garland film Annihilation. This movie was a trip. I loved this movie so much. I remember going to the Alamo Drafthouse. It was really newly refurbished. It was only, I think, only a couple months, 6 months old or something like that. It wasn't that much. It wasn't that old, is what I'm saying. But I remember going to the theater, and there during several parts of this movie. If you haven't seen Annihilation, I'm about to spoil some stuff. This was about 5 women who went into the Shimmer. The Shimmer is an alien like meteorite that hit this lighthouse in Florida, started expanding and expanding. No one knew what it was. They started sending teams in there. No one's came back yet. Oscar Isaac went in. He's one of the main characters of the film, and he is the husband of Natalie Portman, and Natalie Portman, I guess, finds him back home, but it's not the same person. He doesn't exactly know who he is and what's happened. And so Natalie Portman's trying to get to the bottom of it, but she's got a lot of troubled past. And so she goes in with these 5 women into the Shimmer, trying to discover what the hell this thing's all about. You got all sorts of different people, from a biologist to a psychologist, and just different people, different women who all have troubled pasts, who are going into a suicide mission. But I remember watching this film and being just just really stunned by how beautiful everything was. Just biologically, a lot of these things were crafted really, really well. But also, I remember how terrified I was because of just the splicing of this alien horror atmospheric abomination, at least from a human's perspective of what was going on to the flora and fauna. And it's absolutely terrifying. The alligator stuff at the very beginning, but more importantly, the fucking bear. That bear is terrifying, and I remember being in the theater, being very scared. I looked at Hannah, who I was watching it with, and as the first bear attack got me, but the second bear attack, when they were tied up, was probably one of the scariest moments I've had in a theater, just period. And it just really scared me, like, to my core. And I remember watching it with her, and we kept looking at each other like, holy shit, what is happening right now? So it was just a very visceral film, and I loved it. So with each one of these films, all the way starting with Darkness Fall, this terrible film, all the way to Annihilation, I have had many memories with horror and films that scared me and terrified me growing up, all the way to the present day. I really love horror films now, and I'm starting to go to the B horror movies and the Italian horror films and a lot of different films that are just really awaiting me to watch. And so I'm really, really thankful to have these experiences and memories growing up, and honestly I can't wait to make more. So I want to thank you so much for checking out my movie memory series. This is the 2nd episode of this, and I really want to hear your thoughts down below. What should my next one be? I want to hear your top 5 as well. If there's any movies that scared you growing up, watching in the theater or at home or whatever, tell me about them. Also, give me some ideas for another movie memory series, because I'd really like to hear that. Thank you so much for checking out this video. Like, comment, subscribe, hit that notification bell, and I'll see you next time. I'm not jonesing around.